There are films that entertain you, and then there are films that stay inside you long after the credits roll, like a figure on horseback disappearing into the mountain mist, present one moment and gone the next, leaving you wondering if what you witnessed was ever truly real. Pale Rider is that kind of film. Released in 1985, it rode into theaters quietly and left an indelible mark on American cinema that no amount of time has been able to erase. But what became of the faces behind that legend? Some are still here, some are gone. And some stories will genuinely surprise you. Hi, my name is Edward, and this is Screen Legends. Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood was 54 years old when he stepped in front of the camera, as the preacher, the pale and spectral stranger who arrives without explanation and leaves the same way. And if you need a moment to absorb the fact that he was 54 when he made this film look that effortless, please take it. Take. The character carried no name and offered no biography. He appeared out of the wilderness in response to a young girl's prayer, delivered justice without ceremony, and vanished back into the mountains as though he had never existed at all. Whether the preacher was a ghost, an angel, or simply a man who had survived things no man should survive, was left entirely to the imagination of the audience. That ambiguity was not accidental. Eastwood understood instinctively that what is left unsaid in a film often carries more weight than what is spoken aloud. By 1985, Eastwood had already spent more than 2 decades building one of the most formidable careers in the history of Hollywood. From the dusty streets of Sergio Leone's Italian westerns to the San Francisco police precincts of the Dirty Harry franchise, he had carved out a screen persona defined by economy of movement, economy of speech, and an almost geological stillness that made audiences lean forward rather than sit back. Pale Rider was in many ways a culmination of everything he had learned about how westerns could work at their most mythological and most human simultaneously. He did not simply direct the film from behind the camera, he inhabited it completely, bringing to the preacher a weight and a mystery that no amount of screenplay exposition could have manufactured. What came after Pale Rider only deepened his legend. Heartbreak Ridge followed in 1986. Bird, his deeply personal tribute to jazz musician Charlie Parker, arrived in 1988 and earned him serious critical respect beyond the action genre. And then came Unforgiven in 1992, the film that arguably stands as the fullest and most devastating expression of everything Eastwood had been building toward across his entire career. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, finally placing the industry's most formal recognition onto a career that had long outgrown the need for it. In the decades that followed, he continued directing with a consistency and range that younger filmmakers half his age could only study from a respectful distance. Mystic River, Million Dollar Baby, Letters from Iwo Jima, Gran Torino, American Sniper. Each one a film that understood human beings in all their contradiction and frailty. Today, Clint Eastwood is 94 years old. Let that number sit for a moment. 94. He remains active, sharp, and by all accounts, entirely uninterested in slowing down, which is either deeply inspiring or slightly exhausting, depending on where you are in your own life. His net worth is estimated at around $375 million, accumulated across a career that has now spanned more than 7 decades. He paints, he plays golf, he lives on his ranch in Carmel, California, and he continues to be involved in projects that interest him on his own terms. The film industry has changed beyond recognition since 1985. Eastwood, in many ways, has not changed at all. He simply got better. Michael Moriarty. Michael Moriarty was 42 years old when he took on the role of Hull Barrett, the stubborn and deeply decent placer miner who refuses to abandon his claim or his community, no matter how much violence Lowhood's men pour down upon him. Hull was not a man of physical legend. He did not ride in from nowhere trailing mystery. He was ordinary in the most honorable sense of the word, a man who planted his feet in the ground and refused to be moved because he believed that what he was standing on belonged to him and to the people he loved. That kind of quiet stubbornness is harder to play than it looks. Moriarty made it look completely natural. By the time Pale Rider arrived, Moriarty had already established himself as one of the more serious and rigorously trained actors working in American television and film. He had won an Emmy Award for his role in the landmark television miniseries Holocaust in 1978, a performance of such moral seriousness and emotional precision that it remains one of the most respected pieces of television acting from that entire era. He brought that same seriousness to Hull Barrett, grounding every scene he shared with Eastwood in an emotional authenticity that prevented the film from floating entirely into myth. What followed Pale Rider, however, was a career shaped as much by turbulence as by talent. Moriarty became an increasingly outspoken and at times polarizing public figure, engaging in very public disputes with network executives over television content, a battle that eventually led him to relocate to Canada in the mid-1990s. He settled in Nova Scotia and later in other parts of Canada, continuing to act in independent productions, write poetry, compose music, and pursue a creative life that operated almost entirely outside the Hollywood machine that had once celebrated him. There is something genuinely admirable about that. Even if it cost him the kind of mainstream recognition his talent arguably deserved, he never stopped creating. He simply stopped asking anyone's permission. Today, Michael Moriarty is 82 years old. He continues to live a largely private life in Canada, still writing, still composing, still performing in smaller productions. His net worth is modest compared to his more commercially prominent contemporaries, but he has spoken in interviews with something that sounds very much like contentment, which, when you think about it, is not nothing. Not nothing at all. Carrie Snodgress. Carrie Snodgress was 38 years old when she brought Sarah Wheeler to life in Pale Rider. And it is worth pausing for a moment before moving forward because her story deserves real tenderness. Sarah was the emotional center of the film in ways that did not always announce themselves loudly. She was a widow raising her teenage daughter on a mining claim in the California hills, trying to build something permanent out of circumstances that kept threatening to wash everything away. Her feelings for Hull Barrett were warm and real, and her complicated reaction to the preacher, drawn to him and frightened by him in equal measure, gave the film a psychological depth it would have lacked without her. Snodgress had arrived in Hollywood under the most promising of circumstances. Her performance in Diary of a Mad Housewife in 1970 earned her an Academy Award nomination and a Golden Globe, and she appeared to be on the verge of a major career that would place her among the most celebrated actresses of her generation. What happened instead was a story shaped by the kinds of choices that look different from the inside than they do from the outside. She stepped away from acting to be with musician Neil Young, with whom she had a son, Zeke, who was born with cerebral palsy. The relationship eventually ended, and her return to acting was steady, but quieter than the trajectory her early work had suggested. She appeared in films and television productions throughout the 1980s and 90s, never quite recapturing the headline attention of her earliest work, but consistently delivering performances of real quality. Pale Rider was, in many ways, a reminder to audiences who remembered her early promise that the talent had never gone anywhere. It had simply been living a life. Carrie Snodgress passed away on April 1st, 2004, at the age of 57, following heart failure. She had been dealing with health complications for some time before her death. The loss was felt quietly but genuinely throughout the film community, a community that had not always given her the recognition she deserved while she was alive. She deserves to be remembered not as a footnote to other people's stories, but as a performer of genuine gifts who brought warmth, intelligence, and emotional honesty to every role she took. Sydney Penny. Sydney Penny was 13 years old when she stepped into the role of Megan Wheeler, Sarah's teenage daughter. And it is not an exaggeration to say that the entire film begins because of her. It is Megan's prayer over the grave of her dog, a prayer raw with grief and fury and desperate hope that calls the preacher out of the wilderness. She is the moral heart from which the whole story flows. Playing that kind of role at 13, in a film directed by Clint Eastwood, surrounded by seasoned adult actors, required a poise and an emotional intelligence that most adults never fully develop. Penny brought both. Her performance as Megan, navigating the complicated terrain of adolescent feeling that included grief, idealization of the mysterious stranger, and a slowly dawning understanding of what the adult world actually costs, was one of the quietly remarkable aspects of a film already rich with strong work. She held her own in every scene, and that is no small thing. After Pale Rider, Penny continued working steadily in television, building a career that demonstrated real range and longevity across a variety of genres and formats. She became particularly well known to daytime television audiences through her long-running role on the soap opera The Bold and the Beautiful, as well as appearances in All My Children and other major network productions. Soap opera acting gets unfairly dismissed in conversations about serious performance, but maintaining a character's consistency and emotional truth across hundreds of episodes over years requires a discipline that deserves genuine respect. Today, Sydney Penny is 54 years old. She continues to work in television and maintains a warm relationship with the fans who have followed her career across 4 decades. She has spoken in interviews about her memories of making Pale Rider with obvious affection, remembering Eastwood as a director who trusted his actors and created a set where serious work felt possible and even natural. She remains one of the most enduring success stories to emerge from the film, a 13-year-old who grew up on screen and never stopped working. John Russell. John Russell was 63 years old when he took on the role of Marshal Stockburn, the cold, white-haired, and utterly terrifying enforcer dispatched by Leigh Hood to deal with the problem that the preacher represents. And what a performance it was. There is a particular kind of villain that is far more unsettling than the loud, raging kind. The kind who does not need to raise his voice because he has never once doubted that he will get exactly what he came for. Stockburn is that kind. Russell understood this instinctively, and he played it with a stillness that made every scene he occupied feel like a slow drop in temperature. When he and his deputies ride into Carbon Canyon, they do not arrive with fury or chaos. They arrive the way a winter storm arrives, unhurried, inevitable, absolute. The film's entire final act balances on the weight Russell brings to that entrance, and he carries it without visible effort, which is the mark of someone who has been doing serious work for a very long time. And Russell had been. His career stretched all the way back to the 1940s, built across decades of film and television work that established him as one of the more quietly commanding presences in American entertainment. He served in the United States Navy during World War II, was wounded at Guadalcanal, and returned home to pursue acting with the kind of focus that tends to emerge in people who have already survived something genuinely difficult. That background had a way of showing up in his performances, whether he invited it to or not. There was always something in Russell that suggested a man who had seen things and made peace with them, which made him extraordinarily well suited to characters who lived in the moral shadows. Television audiences knew him best through The Lawman, the Western series that ran from 1958 to 1962, in which he played Marshal Dan Troop with the same controlled authority he would bring to Stockburn more than 2 decades later. It was a role that made him a genuine presence in the golden age of the television Western, a genre that produced more hours of American storytelling in that era than almost anything else. There is something genuinely moving about a veteran of that classic era arriving in Pale Rider, one of the Western genre's last truly great statements, and delivering work that stands among the finest of his career. Full Circle does not quite cover it. It feels more like a conclusion that the story was always building toward. John Russell passed away on January 19, 1991, at the age of 69, following complications from emphysema. He had continued working almost to the end. Pale Rider remains among the most powerful late chapter performances in a career that gave audiences nearly 50 years of strong, honest, disciplined work. His Stockburn is not a performance you forget. I'm evil. That quiet never really leaves you. Richard Dysart. Richard Dysart was 53 years old when he stepped into the role of Coy LaHood, the mine owner whose greed and ruthlessness drive the entire conflict of Pale Rider, from its opening frames to its violent conclusion. And the first thing worth saying about his performance is what it is not. It is not theatrical. It is not loud. It does not announce itself with the kind of scenery-chewing villainy that lesser films settle for when they need an audience to understand quickly that someone is the bad guy. Dysart was far too intelligent an actor to reach for any of that, and Eastwood was far too precise a director to allow it, even if he had wanted to. LaHood, as Dysart plays him, is something considerably more troubling than a cartoon villain. He is a man who has constructed an entirely coherent internal world in which everything he does is justified, in which his appetites are simply the natural expression of a man of ambition and vision, and in which anyone standing between him and what he wants is not a person with rights and dignity, but simply an obstacle to be removed. That kind of self-authored righteousness is deeply recognizable. We have all met versions of it, hopefully in smaller doses than Carbon Canyon receives. And Dysart delivers it with such controlled precision that every scene he inhabits carries a genuine undercurrent of danger, even the ones that on the surface appear to be nothing more than a businessman conducting his affairs. What made Dysart so well suited to that kind of role was a career built entirely on the cultivation of authoritative intelligence as a screen presence. He had been working steadily in American film and television since the early 1960s, accumulating a body of work across an extraordinary range of productions that demonstrated a performer who understood instinctively how to fill a frame with credibility. He appeared in Being There, he appeared in Tootsie. He brought the same focused, disciplined intelligence to supporting roles in major films that he brought to leading work in smaller ones. And the consistency across that range is the mark of someone who approached acting as a genuine craft rather than a vehicle for personal attention. The role that introduced him to his largest audience came after Pale Rider, when he was cast as Leland Mackenzie, the founding senior partner of the law firm at the center of the acclaimed legal drama L.A. Law, which ran from 1986 to 1994. That performance earned him an Emmy Award and confirmed what careful observers of his career had understood for years, that here was an actor whose particular combination of warmth, intelligence, and quiet authority was essentially irreplaceable once you understood what you were looking at. Richard Dysart passed away on April 5, 2015, at the age of 86 following a long illness. He never chased the spotlight. He simply kept showing up and doing the work with more care and honesty than most. That turns out to be more than enough. It always does. Chris Penn. Chris Penn was 20 years old when he appeared in Pale Rider as Josh LaHood, Coy's volatile and dangerous son. And even at that age, there was already something unmistakably present about him on screen. Josh was not a complicated character in the way that some of the film's other roles were complicated, but he was vivid and physical and carried a hot, reckless energy that made him genuinely threatening in a way that pure villainy written on a page rarely achieves without the right performer behind it. Chris Penn was, of course, the younger brother of Sean Penn, and the question of what his career might have become had circumstances been different is one that the film world still sits with uncomfortably. He was genuinely talented. His performance in Reservoir Dogs in 1992 demonstrated real range and complexity. His work in films like Footloose and At Close Range showed an actor capable of moving between broad entertainment and serious character work with equal conviction. But his career was also shaped by personal struggles, including well-documented battles with weight and health that affected the consistency of his output across the 90s and into the 2000s. Chris Penn passed away on January 24, 2006, at the age of 40. The cause of death was determined to be an enlarged heart exacerbated by the effects of multiple medications. He was 40 years old. His death landed hard in Hollywood, not just because of his age, but because of the feeling that persisted among people who knew his work well, that he had not yet delivered the defining performance his talent made possible. That is a particular kind of loss. The talent was real. The time simply ran out. He deserved more of it. Richard Kiel. Richard Kiel was 45 years old when he appeared in Pale Rider as Club, the enormous and physically intimidating enforcer in LaHood's employ. And if the name Richard Kiel does not immediately ring a bell, I will offer you two words that almost certainly will. Jaws. Bond. He was the steel-toothed villain who appeared in not one, but two James Bond films. The Spy Who Loved Me in 1977 and Moonraker in 1979, and who became one of the most beloved and recognizable figures in the entire history of that franchise. The fact that a character initially conceived as pure menace became so genuinely charming and even endearing across those two films says everything about the warmth Kiel brought to whatever he was doing. Standing at 7 feet 2 inches, Kiel spent much of his career navigating the particular challenge of being cast primarily for his physical presence, while possessing a humanity and a humor that consistently exceeded whatever the role asked of him. He spoke in interviews with great warmth about his faith, his family, and his genuine affection for the fans who approached him with such enthusiasm about his Bond appearances. There was nothing remote or guarded about him. He was, by all accounts, exactly the opposite of the menacing figures he so frequently portrayed. Richard Kiel passed away on September 10, 2014, at the age of 74, following complications from a leg injury sustained earlier that year. He had continued making appearances and engaging with fans at conventions and events almost to the end, because he genuinely seemed to enjoy it. He is missed with real affection, not just as a screen presence, but as a human being who appeared to understand that the right response to being beloved is simple gratitude. Doug McGrath. Doug McGrath was 34 years old when he appeared in Pale Rider as Spider Conway, one of the miners in the Carbon Canyon community, and his performance belongs to the category of work that holds a film together without ever demanding that you notice it is doing so. Spider was part of the texture of the mining community, one of the ordinary men whose stubbornness and dignity gave the conflict its moral weight. Without convincing supporting performances grounding the community in believable humanity, the mythological dimensions of the preacher's arrival would have felt abstract. McGrath and the other miners made it feel real. McGrath built a steady career in film and television across the decades that followed Pale Rider, appearing in a reliable stream of productions without ever seeking or finding the kind of fame that transforms an actor into a household name. That is not a diminishment. The industry runs on performers who do precise, honest work within the boundaries of what a role requires and who show up ready every single time. McGrath was that kind of actor, the kind every director wants on a set, because they make everything around them more credible. His work in Pale Rider is a small but genuine example of craft deployed in quiet service of a larger story. John Dehner. John Dehner was 67 years old when he appeared in Pale Rider, and by that point, he had already accumulated one of the most extensive and quietly distinguished careers in the history of American film and television. He played T-Bergen in the film, a supporting role that carried the kind of lived-in authority that only arrives after decades of serious work. Dehner had appeared in an almost astonishing range of productions since the 1940s, from major Hollywood films to some of the most beloved television westerns of the 1950s and 60s. His voice alone, a rich and resonant instrument, could fill a scene with credibility before he had delivered a single line of actual dialogue. What is striking about actors like Dehner is the degree to which their contributions to the cultural landscape are systematically underappreciated simply because they were not standing at the center of the frame. The history of American cinema and television is built in substantial part on the work of character actors who gave the stories their weight and texture and believability. And Dehner was among the finest of them. He brought to every role he played a professionalism and a depth that elevated the material around him. John Dehner passed away on February 4th, 1992, at the age of 76, following complications from diabetes and emphysema. He had been working right up until near the end, which feels entirely consistent with everything known about his dedication to the craft. Pale Rider was among his final screen appearances, and it is a fitting place to find him, a veteran of the Western genre, appearing in one of the genre's final great statements, carrying 40 years of craft into a role and making every moment count. Pale Rider arrived in the summer of 1985 and reminded a film world that had largely given up on the Western that the genre was not finished. It was simply waiting for someone with the conviction and the craft to do it properly. Clint Eastwood provided both, and the cast assembled around him, veterans and newcomers, character actors and young performers finding their footing, gave the film a human texture that has allowed it to endure in a way that spectacle alone never could. Some of the people we have visited today are still with us, still working, still finding new ways to contribute to the art form they chose. Others left far too soon, their stories cut short, before everything their talent promised had time to arrive. And a few lived full and complicated lives that took them to places no one could have predicted from that mountain meadow in 1985. That is, when you think about it, exactly what life does. It takes you places. The preacher at the end of Pale Rider rides back up into the mountains and disappears. Megan calls after him. And there is that pause, that long and quiet pause, before the film releases you. I have always believed that pause is the most honest thing about the movie. It acknowledges that some stories do not close neatly, that some figures pass through our lives and leave marks that we carry long after they are gone. The cast of Pale Rider left marks on the film, on the genre, on the audiences who watch them, and on us here at Screen Legends, who believe that the stories behind the stories deserve to be told with the same care and respect that the best performances deserve to be given. My name is Edward. Thank you for riding along. If these stories stayed with you, follow Screen Legends so we can keep exploring them together. There are so many more ahead, and I promise you, not one of them follows the script that anyone expected.